Welcome, everyone. We're excited to discuss a topic today, which is very close to my heart. And when I say I represent Innovaccer here. So just a little background before we get started. So the High Tech Act of 2015 did a great job in pushing all the providers and health systems to adopt EHRs. The adoption, I would say, within a span of 10 years increased from, I would say, 10 to 20% to almost upwards of 90%. But uh, we still see a lot of health systems going to alternative third-party solutions. And primarily because they still see that to complete the triple or quadruple aim, you need to build and maintain a more robust technology stack. As we've built Innovaccer over the past close to 10 years now, we've seen multiple use cases. So through that, we've developed a perspective on both what kind of data is needed for these additional use cases, as well as what are some of the workflows that, when complemented with the EMR's capabilities or EHR's capabilities, and we'll use those terms interchangeably today, they really add value and ensure that, like I mentioned, the triple and quadruple aim gets achieved. So today we'll talk about some of those use cases. And before I jump in, I'll just quickly introduce myself and I'll let my colleague do the same. So I'm Rakshay Jain. I'm an AVP of product at Innovaccer. I've been here close to 4 years. I lead product management for the provider market. And so would love to talk more. But before we jump in, I would love for Dan to also introduce myself, who's my colleague at Innovaccer and part of the product team too.
Hey, hello everyone. Again, welcome to this session. My name is Dan Bonastali. I'm a director of product management at Innovaccer. My focus has been around system interoperability with the Innovaccer platform. I've been working in health IT for quite a while, just over 10 years or so. I actually did get my start at Epic itself. And even at Epic, we spent a lot of time even making different deployments of Epic itself talk to one another. So that's where I really started to become, deeply involved with interoperability and finding my passion in the healthcare technology space. Today, I'm working with Innovaccer to do very similar things, but at a much larger, in a much larger scope, in integrating with different EHR systems, HINs, QHINs, and the entire healthcare technology ecosystem falls under our purview here.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dan. So why don't we get started? Now, just to kick things off, as you know, a lot of us on the call and we at Innovaccer know, our customers have invested millions and millions of dollars into EMR implementations, licensing fees, external third parties to implement it, and they continue to make some significant amount of investments in leveraging and customizing EMRs to ensure they're able to not only enable the end users to deliver better patient care, but also get the operational and financial visibility into the care getting delivered. Now, given this, Dan, would love to get your thoughts on why do you think there is still a need for third-party solutions? And let's maybe build on that.
Absolutely. It's a great question, especially as we've seen the growth of healthcare IT. In the last few years, it's been quite a ride, especially with the challenges that we've seen in virtual health and in remote healthcare in general. I'll start by giving a a little bit of a picture about the customers that we work with and some of our largest, most expansive customers. They frequently span multiple metro areas. Some of them cover multiple states, and they're including clinics and practices and hospitals, sometimes that are running multiple distinct EHR deployments of distinct EHR vendors. And this tapestry of intertwined electronic medical record systems, which frequently are also fairly well customized to fit that specific health system or hospital, does create this environment where data interoperability becomes ever more important and ever more challenging. The leadership at these health systems are acutely aware, and they recognize the upside of organization-wide initiatives to improve patient care and reduce cost. And they're aware that there's a lot of challenges, and they've come up with a lot of solutions to those challenges around orchestrating these initiatives with the technology, even in this diverse ecosystem where every practice and clinic and hospital might be running its own customized EHR deployment.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, Dan, and you brought up some great points here, especially with the move from volume to value, which again has been central to what we've done at Innovaccer from a technology stack perspective. If you think about it, to manage a population well, and a population that might have patients who are very high risk, patients who are healthy, and patients who have never visited a PCP for the last 5 or 6 years. So you have this broad spectrum of patients who consume different levels or amounts of care, and that care could be siloed in multiple settings. So let's say you're a high risk patient, you're probably visiting your PCP 3 to 5 times a year. You're getting referred into specialists. You might, if things go bad, you might need an inpatient admission. You might be going to an ED. You might be then going to a post-acute facility. In this example itself, you've hit 4 or 5 different information systems. Your data is siloed now.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who is taking risk for their patient, and a lot of our customers do that, they need to have the complete picture of that patient to ensure that they can manage the care of that patient and help, like going to come back to my initial comment of achieve the triple or quadruple aim that many of our customers and organizations set out to do. So I just wanted to bring that flavor in, but you raised some good points about just the data being siloed, and how a lot of health systems have built a very complicated application stack because of this. And I would love for you to touch upon how acquisitions might play into this as well. I know when you and I chatted about this, that also plays into the whole data interoperability and architecture piece too.
That's an excellent next step to jump into as well, because it's something that's been shaking up the industry. Is over the last few years, we've seen a lot of investments at these largest health systems, and they've leveraged their existing size to, say, go acquire some new practices, go acquire, for example, maybe some nephrology specialist practices, in order to continue to grow their footprint. And one of the biggest questions that they have is, how do we onboard a new software system, a new system that's running on, their own EHR that they've been using for a long enough time? How do we bring them into the fold while reducing cost and trying to bring their data into your broader organization's data in a seamless manner? And we've been seeing a lot of that more and more. I think it's a combination of larger investments that we've been seeing in the last few years. And then we've also been seeing the results of new regulation, especially in the interoperability space, but really across the board, that's making it more attractive, I think, for larger health systems to be acquiring smaller health systems, larger EHRs even to be acquiring smaller EHRs. And we've seen a lot of that, and especially with our largest customers, that's one of the biggest things that they want to make sure they can do is have a strategy for bringing these new acquisitions into the fold quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that really underlines the need of having an EMR agnostic solution. And just going back to some of our own experiences, right? At this point, we have over, I would say, 150 EMR templates, right? So we have ingested data from 150 different EMRs at this point, and each of those EMRs sometimes have multiple instances, right? So V1 is not same as V2, is not same as V3. So just having an independent third party solution which has developed the capabilities to ingest data from all these different clinical sources, and uh, and more importantly do that accurately and effectively and at speed, is the key to success, especially in use cases around population health and even general patient care, as we think about it. On that point, do you wanna maybe chat about a few use cases? Dan, maybe let's go there. I know we've talked a lot about data and how data is
Yeah.
siloed and how we bring all of those in, but let's maybe delve into workflows.
So I liked your point too about EHR agnosticism, neutrality. It's important to stay, almost neutral in order to play as well as possible with every EHR that we've come across. But another, probably the most obvious use case for third parties that we've seen, and this is more speaking from a generalist term, this isn't being Innovaccer specific yet, but the most obvious use case is data that is generated or comes from outside of the clinic. Third-party tools are springing up and are really an ideal entry point into seeing genomic data, home device data, insurance plan and claims data, all of the things that don't come directly from the EHR, but are more and more becoming data points that users of the EHR would like to see as part of their workflows, as part of their day-to-day activities. And they're increasingly relying on third-party solutions to accomplish that. Secondly, third-party solutions are, just by nature of how software is developed today, they're frequently cloud-based. And they get to take advantage of that cloud architecture to scale their solutions, but also enable more tactical victories like centralizing their program management, changes to care protocols. Care protocols are rarely static, or updates to recommendations for care coming from clinical bodies. These can change, and it's important that the tool that you're using to manage these programs can likewise be nimble and adapt to that without having to make, for example, dozens of changes in each individual EHR to react to upstream changes in the care protocols or recommendations coming from clinical associations. Third,
Yep.
I think we've seen quite a lot of in the last few years is the tight product focus that third parties are able to bring to the table. Because they're not, in many ways, needing to support the full legal medical record and all health system hospital workflow activities, they can focus on specific use cases with all of their might. Things like remote monitoring, care management. These are things that third parties might have an upper hand in many ways to electronic medical records, who they do need to remain very horizontally spread across all hospital
Right.
activities.
So that if they need to make any interventions post discharge to prevent a readmission, they can do so effectively. They want to have an alert to see if a patient needs to be tucked in for the weekend, so that they don't end up in the ED, right? So you have some predictive analytics at play here, which needs to, again, guess what, be powered by robust data, because you can't make an effective prediction if you don't have robust data. So I've seen this play out in multiple scenarios where, um, to give a clear example of one of our customers, they really liked uh, obviously the aspect that we were able to ingest data for the patients they were taking risk for, and give that unified view. But even more than that, they were able to activate care plans and care protocols for those patients in an automated way. and
Mhm.
and as a cherry or icing on the cake, right, they were able to push that documentation back into their EMR near real time, right? So no double documentations. The administrators loved it because they were executives who were tasked with ensuring that the organization becomes successful from a population health perspective, and they get the necessary incentives. So they were reducing readmissions, like they were seeing results there, and the users loved it because it didn't really make their life more difficult, right? So, when we talk about some of these use cases and how we can interoperate with EMRs and complement their functionalities, this is a great example where data analytics workflows need to come together with, I think, to your point, Dan, the ability to easily interoperate with the the source of truth, which is the EMR, and avoid any double documentation. So I just wanted
I
to throw it in there, as you kind of talk about use cases here.
and you mentioned as well that the users loved it. I feel that's a very important point to bring up, is that users do like it when you're allowing them to use one single system to accomplish their workflow. And one thing that I think is, very, very important is the training side, and the fact that when you're looking at something like care management, it's not all it's a living, your program is a living thing in many ways. It grows, you onboard new care managers, um, people switch locations. You may have care managers who are primarily working with patients in, one location, but those patients are also being seen elsewhere, and they have their own charts, maybe at a specialist, maybe at their PCP, maybe they moved. All of these things are ever changing. And to be able to say, what we'll do is we'll layer one single program on one single software over the entire organization ecosystem, which may include several distinct EHRs. What you're doing is you're building a sustainable care management program that's not dependent on any one EHR, or even dependent on functionality that exists maybe in, one EHR, but maybe in a different EHR it looks different. It would create quite a headache to train, onboard, and make sure that that program stays consistent for the patients who, they deserve to have a consistent experience as a patient.
Yep, yep. No, I think those are fair points. I know we talked a lot about care management. Let's switch gears and talk about one of my other really favorite use cases, point of care. And so again, going back to some of the workflows, and let's keep the context in mind that we are in a environment where there are health systems and practices and provider groups on multiple EHRs, right? And a lot of those patients are are at risk, right? So the health system is financially incentivized to do certain tasks to manage the patient better, right? And obviously, if they do that, the quality of care gets improved, but then they also get reimbursed appropriately. So talk to me a little bit about uh, what are some point of care workflows that you've seen in your experience, and how might interoperability play into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So um, there's a couple of things I want to focus on. One is it's not just us talking about third party usage. It's the EHRs themselves who have decided that it's important for them and for their users to support third party solutions. So I do want to talk a little bit about how many EHRs have built their own marketplaces to support solutions like ours. We're present today on Epic, Cerner, and Athena. And these sort of marketplaces empower applications, really any sort of third-party applications, to exist at the point of care. What we find very helpful with these programs is it is a way for us and the EHRs to work together to build the right solutions that can be surfaced at the point of care in a workflow that's seamless for end users. And to get into your question more directly, Rakshay, is the workflows that we typically see at the point of care. There are, I mentioned earlier, outside data is one of the key use cases of third-party solutions, and at the point of care, it's even more important. Bringing in claims data, insurance plan data, and clinical data that originates from outside the EHR, perhaps clinical data that Innovaccer has pulled in from a specialty clinic or from the patient's previous PCP. All of this combines into a data set that's even richer in many cases than what's currently present in the EHR. And this point of care integration allows this third-party tool to exist on top of and directly part of the user's workflow in such a way where the user can then make decisions off of a larger set of data. I'll actually kick that question back to you, Rakshay. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how analytics factors on top of this richer data set at the point of care to help with decision making.
Yeah, and I think, by the way, you raised some great points about how marketplaces are a great way for health systems and customers. A lot of our customers, they again take risk for the patients they deploy on our platform, right? And one of the key use cases is risk adjustment. So risk adjustment has, again, data components, there are analytics components, and then there are workflow components. On the data side, you need to have a good mousetrap on the claims or the financial information on the patient. But then more importantly, and what really differentiates, I would say, good from great risk adjustment solutions is the ability to ingest unstructured data in the form of progress notes or PDFs, and then run NLP and AI machine learning models to extract the relevant evidence which might of risk, right? So it's about getting paid appropriately, right? Not high, not low. So but that's key. Unstructured data is a wealth of information, right? It can be used for risk adjustment, and it can be also used for care gap closure, right? So many of our customers have quality measures that they need to perform on at a certain clip to ensure that they get incentivized appropriately on their value-based care contracts. So we can bring structured data in the form of claims or clinical information. We can ingest unstructured data in the form of PDFs, and then we can run our proprietary analytics to generate those insights which enhance risk and quality workflows and analytics. Now, all of this is great. You might be thinking, like, how does the user consume this, right? So going back to one of the points that you mentioned about point of care tools, that's one of the main places we see the end user interacting with the this risk and quality analytics, because that's we need to meet them where they're actually interacting with the patient, right? So our InNote tool is able to sense whenever a patient interaction is happening during the visit, and it's able to display those care gaps and coding gaps, and then the physician can take action on it. And I also want to mention here that we have not just stopped there. We've also taken it and thought about, as we did with care management, like what does the user, which could be the physician themselves, or it could be their team, what would they do next? So they would have to go and then do some documentation in the EMR. So we have enabled a one-click documentation through our product InNote. Let's say if they are interacting with a coding gap on our system, and they want that coding gap to reflect in an EMR as an encounter with the appropriate documentation, we can enable that in just one click. So just to summarize, um, talking about the data silos, integrating all of those structured and unstructured elements, running, you know, proprietary analytics to then push them to point of care, and then more importantly ensure that the same workflow reflects in an EMR, is something that we've worked on, and again we've seen our customers leverage and really love using those solutions.
So you talk about the ability to pull data from the entire organization across many different EHRs, pull data from different payers, from different plans into a single system. When I'm thinking about this in terms of how some of our largest customers do have a similar world that they operate in, what does this mean? It sounds to me like this means that this kind of solution can be deployed at a health system level, a level beyond the individual practice, the individual clinic, the individual hospital, but that this kind of approach, which can only really be achieved by third parties working closely with electronic medical records, is how you really get to that level of thinking of things
Yeah.
at the health system level.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. So, and I've had the opportunity to lead the team that has developed the InNote product, and while we were envisioning that product, we've always thought of it as a platform, right? And uh, as you think about any platform, it should be able to enable any other third party applications, right? So let's say if there is a digital health company which wants to come and embed their intelligence, we can enable that. The other thing that we're very focused on is we have a multimodal approach, right? So in it can be deployed as a desktop application, it can be deployed as it can be deployed as a web URL, and we're also planning to launch a mobile app for that sometime next year. So it's multimodal. It's built as a platform. So to your point about, it's just not specific to population health use cases at this point. It can be activated for non-value based care workflows and use cases too. But you raise an interesting point about how do we enable broader use cases. One of the areas that we have seen this play out is referrals, right? And referrals, again, if you think of a lot of our customers, they have their employed physicians and they have affiliated providers. And one of the things that they struggle with is leakage, right? So whenever a patient that they are taking risk for goes to an affiliate provider, they don't have good control over that patient post that, right? And what that means is that once that patient goes out of network, then they lose the quality of care that is getting delivered to that patient might vary, right? And might not be appropriate. It could result in a readmission, and there could be some cost implications too. So we again have a referral module which is embedded into our InNote application, which is at the point of care, which can not only guide the referral to the right place, but we can also add some intelligence around the right specialist, which might be appropriate for that patient based on their condition. And so that's a use case that I feel is very it's very broad, and it impacts potentially your entire book of business, not just value-based care. Talk to me a little bit about AI. And again, I know both you and I, and through our teams, we've been working on this and thinking about how AI gets embedded into our solutions and how it can improve productivity. But would love to get your thoughts on how what's our approach there, and how that might impact our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the big topics at every conference this year is how might we leverage AI to solve a lot of these problems that we're experiencing today. And I would initially sort of preface that there's many different types of AI. There's generative AI, which has picked up a lot of attention recently. But Innovaccer has been using AI for many different capabilities over the years. Rakshay, you mentioned NLP as a key mechanism by which data that maybe is coming to us in an unstructured or semi-structured format can be brought into a data platform in a standardized format, normalized, cleaned, aggregated, especially when you are in that situation where notes at clinic A are written differently than notes at clinic B. And this sort of solution really, this sort of problem really does call for an AI-based solution, which we have long supported. Secondly, there's the analytics that you've discussed about, well, once we do have this data in our system that's multi-sourced, multi-dimensioned, how do we discern insights from it? And this is another piece where AI has long since been a part of our platform, and machine learning comes into play to use past data and outcomes to determine what a user might do in the future and the information that they might need to see in the future. So these are really the two types of AI that have been prevalent for years. This third piece of AI that's become very popular, we play in that space as well. I think, and actually I'll kick that over to you.
And I will beat you to that, Dan, because that's something that I've been spending a lot of my time. I think you've been, obviously, you're the expert on how we bring in the data and how do we interoperate with various different information systems. But workflows, when we were thinking about AI sometime earlier this year, we were also when we were speaking to our customers, we were just seeing that especially health systems were bleeding from a profitability standpoint, right? And when we dug deeper, and when we talked to some of our senior executives at our customers, labor seemed to be driving a lot of that, right? And like labor expenses. When I say labor, I mean labor expenses. And then most importantly, the engagement levels were also average or on the lower side, right? We had physicians and nurses who were not engaged. There was a lot of talk on, and there is still a lot of talk on burnout. So we thought about what can we do at Innovaccer to solve this problem, basically. So we came up with a productivity stack, and we have a 4-pronged approach there, and I would like to touch upon that quickly for our attendees here. So the first prong is and we've branded it as Sarah. So all of those solutions are Chris and Sarah. And Sarah, for the folks on this call, is short for Saraswati. Saraswati is the goddess of wealth use cases. SARA for care management is the first use case, which is targeted at care managers. And the idea there is that how can we enhance or reduce the time, so enhance their efficiency and reduce the time they spend documenting. So a lot of our current users spend maybe a few minutes, and sometimes up to 10 to 15 minutes to document a care protocol or a care plan. So how can we listen into a conversation that they're having with the patient and then autofill that care protocol for them? And then more importantly, start a care plan with some suggestions of things they might want to do, right? So that's the first use case, SARA for care management. Then the second use case we tackled was SARA for Insights, which is essentially uh, enabling anyone to talk to the data. So we wanted to leave behind the days where you need to open up a dashboard, or God forbid, ask a data analyst to write some custom SQL queries, but just talk to the data and get the answers in minutes, not weeks, right? So that's SARA for Insights. The third one is SARA for Point of Care. We talked a lot about point of care, but uh, one of the use cases that we've focused on is AMPIN documentation. The other one that we're focused on is differential diagnosis. So this is again listening to the patient and provider conversation at point of care and then helping them document faster, more effectively, more accurately, and then taking it one step further and starting to develop and help them with billing, and submitting the right encounters and diagnosis codes. So and then finally we have SARA for Experience Center, which integrates with our contact center application, which helps users, specifically contact center reps, to fill tickets automatically. Again, the ticket, once as they're talking uh, to the member or the patient, the conversation is being listened to, and then the ticket is auto generated and filled up post the call. Even while they're talking to the member or patient, are the AI is suggesting things that they might want to chat about based on the patient history. Let's say they called in to schedule a PCP appointment, but they're due for a breast cancer screening, right? Or based on their history, they might need something else. So those suggestions or nudges can be made all near real time to the call center rep. So I'll get off my soapbox at this point. I really, this gets me really riled up and excited when I talk about Sarah and the investments we're making in AI. Let's go back to an area that I know you are very passionate about. Is let's get into the nuts and bolts of integration. So we talk a lot about um, write backs, right?
Mhm.
And talk us through the menu. Like, what are the options that are available to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. I like this topic a lot because, I've been in this space for quite a while, and where we as an industry are today, it's a very exciting place because we're seeing the growth and expansion of interoperability. We can't just say we're writing back to one EMR. We can say we may be writing back to several. We may be writing back to one for one patient, another for a different patient. And so to take a step back, maybe stepping back 20 years, we were really using just HL7 interfaces for moving data into EHRs. And in many situations, that remains a a first step for interoperability for many situations. A lot of OR devices, for example, are still going to be communicating with the medical record through that interface. What we have seen significant growth of is a combination of APIs that EHRs have introduced, some Fire APIs, some native proprietary APIs, some EHRs having done this for many years, some EHRs building these as a response to ONC regulation. But this has been very exciting for us because it means us, other third parties, can more easily acquire and push data to and from electronic medical records, and really any site that's supporting these APIs. For For us, we have a large enough scale that APIs or APIs fire or not. But the fact that most of these electronic medical records have gone ahead and conformed to fire, I think is spectacular because it means that any third party, if I'm positioning these technologies, you have HL7 as sort of this legacy base layer. Groups moving to APIs, I think, is right now sort of the hot area in interoperability. But what comes next? That's a pretty deep question, and I do want to relate that back to AI a little bit. um,
Sure.
we,
Be my guest.
yeah. So we see APIs too as efficient ways of talking to computers. A lot of a lot of what we're seeing though is that use cases that would require human communication can now be solved. So AI can function in many ways like an API, but the most important API of all of human language to accomplish some really complex tasks. So that's really that sort of third space where this industry is going to start going in the next few years is what can we what can we accomplish automatically in a variety of different systems where AIs like Sarah can do spectacular things like set up referrals, schedule appointments, and drive care in ways beyond the capability of a simple API.
Yeah, won't it be wonderful to have a Google Duo type experience in healthcare? So, if I need to make a reservation, and when my wife tells me to make a reservation, I always make it the day off, right? Because I forget. That's a separate issue of why that happens. And you don't know that, right? That's happening at the back end. So, wouldn't it be wonderful to imitate and replicate that workflow for, let's say, a patient appointment, right? And or let's say if a care manager needs to get in touch with a patient, there is just a bot that is calling and scheduling a time and putting it on the calendar. So it's a combination of obviously conversational AI and a little bit of RPA, which used in tandem can really help automate what currently is a time sink for a lot of our frontline workers, right?
Mhm. I Google Duo is a perfect example. I remember reading one quote that stuck with me that it focuses on the only API that matters, which is, of course, that direct communication.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Uh, you mentioned HL7. Talk to our attendees about just, I know there are ADT messages, there are MDM messages, there are, ORU messages, like just based on the use case, what are the type of HL7 messages? I think that our attendees would love to get a little bit deeper there.
Yeah, absolutely. So um, you can accomplish quite a lot with HL7 interfaces. They've been used for over a decade, right? To solve problems like pushing discrete measurements into EHRs. That's what, your OR monitoring devices do. They can be used to upload PDFs, push transcripts through the MDM interface, add, remove, edit items from your problem list, place orders. Most of those sort of what you would typically think of as what can I do in my EHR. Historically, we've been able to handle these through HL7 messages, and it's really only in the last 5 or 6 years where the paradigm has shifted, right? And folks saying, you know what, we're going to lean on our EHRs a little bit and say, hey, let's build, let's support some of these same operations over API. And what we're seeing today is that some of these, such as document upload, some EHRs are supporting things like flow sheets. In addition, visit diagnoses and problem list diagnoses. Some EHRs are saying, you know what, we'll support APIs to let you do this. And that's a major change in how we think about things, because what this means for our clients is that we can drastically and dramatically speed up the time it takes to implement some of these newer solutions. HL7 was great for getting the job done and having a solution that is interoperable. But health systems are increasingly looking for ways to make these implementations more standard, require less efforts, and make this more cost effective. And I think this has become very important in the last few years too, because um, as folks have become, I think, a little bit more conscious of their cost of goods and conscious of the amount of hours that they're asking, say, an interface analyst to devote to a specific task.
Makes sense. No, I think those are great points, and it segues very well into the next topic I want to get your thoughts on is implementation, right? Because um, while all of these concepts might sound great in theory, talk us through like how does this actually get implemented based on your past experience?
Yes, absolutely. I'll actually ask you a question as well. So, um, when we're implementing, or when anyone is implementing, say, an HL7 interface, um, off the top of your head, how long do you think it might take to actually set something like that up?
Well, if I had my druthers, I would love it to happen in a day. But having been in healthcare for now close to 15 years, I know that's not feasible at all. So I would probably guess about a month.
Yeah, and I that's right on the money. I mean, I think one of the other confounding factors here too is that you have just tons of variability. It's a tough thing to plan, right? So what we've as an industry have been working with is how do we take these fast growing digital health companies and who have a product that deserves to be used and will make users day to day just far easier. How do you get over that hump, right? Of, hey, we'll need to borrow an interface analyst on our client's team. They'll be working with us for at least a month. They're probably working on multiple projects simultaneously. And what we've been seeing increasingly in the last few years too is that this sort of position is there's been a significant amount of turnover in many cases as well. So we have folks who are new to health systems and are learning the ropes themselves as far as how to work in the HL7 world. And that leads me to this up to the topic that you were looking to talk about. How do we design our software with not just the clinical user in mind, not just the patient in mind, but also with the IT analyst and the implementer in mind? And for us, that means even during the development process, the requirements gathering process, we need to make sure that what we're building is meeting their needs as well. Else, we might never have a solution that gets through that large hump of implementation. So when we design not just HL7 interfaces, but configurable and customizable API templates by which we can push data into disparate systems, we focus on, well, how can we also make this implementable in 1 to 2 weeks? How can we make this implementable with minimum, say, a couple of hours time on the health IT side, our counterparts. I think a lot of us have even worked in that space before. We know how tough it is. And so our participation, not only in adhering to FHIR APIs and custom APIs at various EHR systems, but participating directly in the marketplaces, validating these directly with the EHR, testing them thoroughly within EHR sandboxes, even at the very first stage of development, has given us the ability to accomplish these fast timeframes at groups like Athena Health, Cerner as well. We're a part of their marketplace. And we are also, members of the Connection Hub marketplace as well. And that's given us this tremendous advantage to deploying these quickly and without error.
Awesome. No, that's awesome. That's great. And again, Dan, thank you so much for your thoughts. I'm just looking at the time here. I think we need to start wrapping up. The stab of just summarizing, and then again open to feedback from attendees. So I think the first thing we talked about, that the data fabric is very siloed, and it has become siloed for various reasons. There have been health systems which are acquisitive. There are health systems which have been building affiliate networks to manage populations which they take risk for. But the key point being that the data of that patient is siloed. It needs to be brought together to ensure that the right quality of care can be delivered in a timely way. Then building on top of that, we talked about a lot of workflows: care management, point of care workflows, referral management, analytics, which again, given the robust data that has been ingested and cleaned and made and activated for use, can be pushed to the right users in the right setting, right? So that they can again not only be successful in their day to day, but like we talked about, bring in elements of AI, like how do we enhance their productivity and improve their throughput and eventually satisfaction, right? Like if they are spending less time documenting, they're getting, they're reducing their pajama time, right? And they're probably getting to go home in a timely way and spend time with family or whatever they wish to do outside of work, right? Then we touched upon a little on the nuts and bolts of integration. Again, I would like to say it's still an art and not a science. And and based on the use case, there's a menu of options. And again, I know, Dan, you've done a great job in just helping activate that at Innovaccer. But the key idea being, it varies depending on the use case and the timeline of implementation. But the good thing is that there's a host of options available at this point for all the major EHRs, right? And as in when we become more fire ready, I think, and those capabilities mature, this is just going to continuously improve. So that's my quick summary. Again, if there is any feedback, would love to hear from you. Again, feel free to reach out to either me or Dan directly on LinkedIn, and we'll be sharing links in the chat for you guys to reach out. But again, would thank you all for your time, and hope you have a nice rest of the year, and happy holidays.
Happy
Take care,
holidays.
folks, and yeah, we'll see you soon.